Can you trace India's relationship with China from the fall of Qing dynasty around 1912 to establishment of communist regime in China in 1949?
There is a very famous saying regarding Pakistan that every country has an army, but Pakistan is a nation where an army has a stake. How will you substantiate this point?
From a third person's perspective, how do you analyze this type of regime? Is it good for a country like India, or is it not in the larger interest of India?
May I come in, sir?
Come in.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Have your seat,
Thank you,
Meghal. Give a brief introduction.
Sir, myself, Meghal Kumar. I have been born in Lucknow, largely born and brought up in Lucknow, and otherwise brought up in several places across UP wherever my father was posted. I did my 12th and 10th from Lucknow and Kota. Then onwards, I did my BTech graduation in civil engineering from IIT Guwahati.
Largely born in Lucknow or largely brought up in Lucknow?
Largely brought up in Lucknow, sir.
Okay. So I can see your DAF, you are a multi-talented person. You have won prizes for photography, you have gone good amount of trekking, you are having multiple interest in IER, etc., China, Pakistan, etc. Can you trace India's relationship with China from the fall of Qing dynasty around 1912 to establishment of communist regime in China in 1949?
Sure, sir. Following the fall of Qing regime, sir, during the time of British imperialism in India, there was a treaty of Shimla called Shimla Treaty that was signed in 1914, according to which there was an attempt to delineate the border with China. However, that was failed. Subsequently, India remained under the colonial occupation. However, the Indian freedom struggle leaders tried to build a substantial relationship with the Chinese, especially the nationalists under the Kuomintang. The nationalist leader Chiang Kai-shek also visited India in 1938 under the Ramgarh session and addressed the session as well. Furthermore, sir, after the collapse of the nationalist regime, the Chinese communists took over, and there was a substantial anxiety among various quarters in India, particularly from Sardar Patel. After the independence, the relationship was established with India amongst the first countries to recognize the Chinese Communist Party without any favor from the other side. Furthermore, the relationship substantially deteriorated with the Chinese occupation and invasion of Tibet in the early 50s and the ingress into the Indian territories in the 60s following the border incursion and a unilateral invasion in 1962. The relationship was normalized in 1980s, particularly 1988, under the Honorable Rajiv Gandhi's government, and the other side led by Mr. Deng Xiaoping. Furthermore, sir, in substantial confidence...
That's fine. I was interested up to 1949. Do you think that through the Treaty of 1954, we recognize autonomy of Tibet as well as Tibet being integral part of China was a diplomatic mistake on our part? We shouldn't have recognized Tibet as integral part of China?
So there were certain circumstances at that point in time which led our political leadership to believe this was the right decision, particularly building Asian solidarity in a way. However, in the luxury of the hindsight, I think, sir, it was a hasty decision in some ways. Probably we should not have given such a big concession without achieving something in return. Additionally, sir, we lost a lot of our concessions in Tibet and Xinjiang. For example, our trading post. For example, our many other establishments, our posts, for example, our communication infrastructure. So with the luxury of the hindsight, I think, sir, probably we can say...
When did China occupy what is today called Aksai Chin?
So the Chinese incursion in Tibet began in early 1950s, and I think with the highway G219, they occupied Aksai Chin by 1959, I think.
Okay. Fine. So what is today's condition? Do you think that in spite of our rhetorics, we are liberally importing Chinese goods for last several years, since I think 2007-8, and in last 10 years, our import has increased substantially, but our export has actually reduced. What is the present data of export-import with China?
So the present data suggests a problematic view, sir. The trade deficit has been consistently increasing, and in this year, China has overtaken the Americans as India's largest trading partner, primarily because of the rise in our imports. The imports rise particularly are in electronic sector and mineral processing, particularly in critical minerals like lithium and others. In this way, sir, as such, I think it is by and large government policies unable to make a breakthrough in the short term, sir. However, I would say that government has made a very conscious decision for medium to long term to reduce these critical dependencies on the Chinese. In this regard, sir, several investment restrictions have been made, several trade restrictions have been made, quality measures have been introduced to restrict imports from China, particularly in electronic goods, and PLI schemes for several sectors have been launched to further boost the manufacturing and reduce imports.
Do you have any
from China.
rough idea how much we used to import in 2014-15 and how much we are importing today?
Approximately, sir, present data is $117 billion of import, if I remember correctly, and this data was substantially less in 2015. I would not know the exact data, sir, but a rough guesstimate would be probably 50, 60, maybe $70 billion.
You are quite close. And what is export?
The export, I do not know the exact figures, sir, but probably 30, 40 billion dollars would be the present scenario.
And in 14-15?
Probably, sir, 10 to 15 billion dollars.
No, it was close to above 20. So export is not rising. Export has risen only 50% from 20 to 30. Import has risen more than 60 to 120. That is also in percentage term about 100%.
Sir.
Why we are not able to increase our exports to China?
Several reasons, sir. One is there's substantial inroads in the Indian market, particularly with the trading community, sir. There have been reports that the Chinese Communist Party, particularly their espionage wings and the others, have been involved in favoring such traders at the grassroots level who import small stuff like the electronics or toys or other initiatives, bypassing or incentivizing them to import from China rather than import locally. Additionally, sir, I think it is our lack of ease of doing business or push for manufacturing, particularly the regulatory cholesterol that the government still has, the lack of adequate infrastructure, the skill development, the logistics to GDP ratio being 14%, a very high margin, which is 10% in China.
I got your point, Meghal. Thank you.
Meghal, you have put BSF as your top preference.
Yes.
Any reason behind it?
Yes, sir. Sir, BSF is deployed in very critical areas. So it undertakes very challenging operations, sir. Along LOC in Jammu and Kashmir, in Red Corridor, it undertakes various tough counterinsurgency, counter-terrorist, counter-infiltration operations, sir. And I like those operations, sir. I like these challenges. I would like to lead them. Secondly, sir, I think BSF has a legacy of its own, sir. It was involved in the 1971 war. It was involved in several other theaters. It was involved the first force to deal with the surge of terrorism in Kashmir after Operation Tupac in the 1990s. And it had handled the situation fairly well, sir, although there were some problems. So I think, sir, the legacy is I would like to be part of that legacy, sir.
Right.
That is
There are some concerns by some of the bordering states. While the union government tried to increase the jurisdiction of BSF, right, in terms of area-wise.
Yes.
How do you see it?
So recently the jurisdiction was increased from 15 to 50 kilometers and reduced from 80 to 50 kilometers in Gujarat. I think, sir, it was uniformitization of the area of jurisdiction of BSF. States like Punjab has raised concerns because they think it will be a violation of their federalism. I humbly disagree, sir. I do not think that was the case. In the light of emerging scenarios like the Taliban occupying Afghanistan and the increase in drug influx into Pakistan, furthermore, Indian elections approaching, beyond that, a nexus of Chinese and Pakistanis emerging to contain India. In the light of these scenarios, I think, sir, the volatility across the border is only going to increase, particularly along the Pakistan border. In this light, sir, I think increasing responsibility or jurisdiction of BSF was a right decision.
Right. Suppose you are leading your team and you are working for anti-Naxal operation and you find out that Naxals have created some kind of human shield as a front, right? In that case, how will you act? There is a human shield behind it, probably Naxals.
Sir, I would first of all urge restraint at the part. The human shield is particularly deployed to initiate to capture some sort of propaganda of forces committing atrocities on people who are unarmed. I would not want anything of that sort to happen. So on the human shield, on the people who are unarmed and not a threat to my company or my forces, I will ensure that minimum harm comes to them while realizing my mission objectives. In that scenario, sir, I would initiate something which is called non-lethal force on them to disrupt them or move them aside from my area of logistics, using various instruments like tear gases, probably water cannons, or maybe shields and lathis if required. Obviously minimum force is required, and then I will further proceed with initiating possibly arrest if certain elements are disrupting my operations, and then I'll proceed with my mission objectives.
You love reading about Pakistan's geopolitics. There is a very famous saying regarding Pakistan that every country has an army, but Pakistan is a nation where an army has a state. How will you substantiate this point?
Sir, during the independence, when India got independence in Pakistan, an overwhelming amount of British Indian Army went back to Pakistan, which is present-day Pakistan. The political leadership, however, was weak, was not substantially deeply rooted, as was the case with India. As such, the only institution that had some sort of credibility in that area was, unfortunately, the Pakistan Army. Not the civilian bureaucracy, not the politicians. They were not genuine people who were supported from the upside, from the British political class, i.e. the Muslim League. As such, they acquired power with subsequent coups with the General Ayub Khan, Yahya Khan, Zia-ul Haq, and finally Mr. Musharraf. In that regard, sir, they have always sought to exploit Pakistan's resources for their own benefit, and therefore in this regard they have always surged up and inflated the threat of India, or particularly the threat of Hindu India, quote unquote, against the ideology of Pakistan. So therefore they present themselves as the guardian and the ideological guardian of Pakistan, a super state sort of a thing, and they legitimize their position, they legitimize themselves as guardians of Hakiki Azadi, as they call it.
Fine, Mehul. My last question is that you are a civil engineer. Can you tell us what is the importance of capital expenditure for an economy, and if you can give us some idea about the proportion of capital expenditure that India is spending these days?
Yes, sir. The capital expenditure is substantially important because it has a spin-off ratio or a positive externality of a substantial margin, more than 1.5, I think. And in this regard, sir, it has something which is called a crowding in phenomena. In a way that whenever the government invests in capital expenditure, a lot of private investment subsequently happens, and therefore the supply side eases, further easing the inflation, also increasing investments and FDIs as well. In this regard, sir, the government has consistently focused on increasing capital expenditure, with it going up to a maximum extent of, if I'm not wrong, 6 point. I'm forgetting the exact data, sir. Probably it is 6.5 lakh crores.
No need to guess it.
Sir?
Fine, thank you.
Meghal, what is an authoritarian regime?
So the authoritarian regime is an anathema to the democratic regime. It is generally characterized by a paramount leader exercising absolute control over the state, its legislature, executive, and the judiciary. As such, it does not tolerate dissent, and a few examples of it worldwide would be the...
From a third person's perspective, how do you analyze this type of regime? Is it good for a country like India, or is it not in the larger interest of India?
I would say, sir, it is not good for India, particularly given India's ancient traditions of dialogue, diplomacy, India being the mother of democracy. I don't think authoritarian regime would work well, because especially the diversity of India.
Okay, but according to a latest report published by PEW Research Center, 85% of the Indians favor some kind of authoritarian regime. Either they want an authoritarian leader or a military rule. Why do you think people in India are so fed up with the caste-based politics, appeasement politics, and now they are looking forward to such a stringent political setup?
So my answer will contain two parts, sir. First part, sir, I don't think people are fed up, sir, in my humble opinion. I think people are still very enthusiastic, sir. If we look at other surveys, India is amongst the most, for example, a several surveys point out that India substantially favors our political leadership, particularly the Honorable Prime Minister. The other thing, sir, the Pew Research Survey, so-called, as our External Affairs Minister has pointed out, these surveys must be taken with a pinch of salt, sir. After all, they are not Indians, sir. They seek to push a particular political narrative. As such, they could be defaming India. I don't think that is the case, sir.
Okay. Meghal, what is the issue revolving the Teesta River dispute between India and Bangladesh? What is the current status?
So the current status is that it remains unresolved. Primarily amongst the reason is the lack of initiative from the state government of West Bengal. This was also the case in the previous government, the UPA 1 and UPA 2. And the primary reason for that is Bangladesh seeking a reasonably favorable
okay, Meghal, in this case, we see a clear distinction between the national interest and the interest of the state government. So, considering this particular scenario, which should have a greater precedence, the national interest or the interest of the state government?
I think, sir, in regard, I don't think the two are antithetical to each other. The national interest must take precedence. However, no pernicious infliction upon the state interest must happen. In this case, I don't think that is happening, sir.
Okay, when we talk about this particular state of West Bengal, it is largely seen that the laws that are made by the union, the state often refuses for their implementation. The recent example being the CAA and the provisions related to NRC. So, is it just a politically motivated turmoil, or there is some substance to it?
I'm sorry, sir, I did not got your question.
Okay, for example, the union came out with the Citizenship Amendment Act and the associated rules, and the government of the state of West Bengal is saying that we will not allow the implementation of this particular law.
Yes.
Question number 1, can a state government do that under the provisions of the constitution? Question number 2, is it just a politically motivated stand on part of the state government, or it has some substance to it?
Firstly, sir, under the constitution, article 256, 257 clearly enunciate that under no circumstances state government's executive power can breach the centre's law, and in article 257 clearly states it cannot breach the executive domains of the government. So no, sir, they cannot do it under any circumstance. Second part, sir, I think there's a combination of two. It is politically motivated, coupled with probably some allegations have been leveled as vote bank politics with increasing infiltration from Bangladesh, particularly after 1971 war, and therefore a demographic change taking place, and therefore it's a combination of political motivation as well as certain structural factors which have a historical precedence.
So,
Meghal, who has been, according to your assessment, the best Prime Minister for India's development so far?
So, do I have to name one?
Yeah.
I would say, sir, Honorable former Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao.
Okay, and why?
So, there were very extremely exigent circumstances under which he took the reins and he pulled the nation off successfully. The several circumstances were, first of all, the economic crisis. He stood as a bulwark behind Honorable Finance Minister Shri Manmohan Singh, while he led all the reforms which so many constituencies in India were against, like the Bombay Club, for example, the industrialist who benefited from the protectionist regime. Further, sir, I think in the security scenario, he handled it very well. The Operation Tupac and the surge of terrorism in Jammu Kashmir. Furthermore, sir, the Sri Lanka situation, the disturbance, the Punjab situation was under tremendous pressure. Mr. KPS Gill was handling it. He backed him. Furthermore, sir, Northeast was in turmoil. The Assam agitation had recently turned off. After all, sir, and then there was taking forward the relationship with China after normalization 1988. And finally, sir, the attempt to normalize the relationship with the Americans. A lot of hostility was coming from the Americans, with them supporting Pakistan on Kashmir. Consistently ensuring India's interest, he curtailed India's egos, or he did not got emotional about these things. He acted as a statesman, sir, rather than a politician.
Why do you think the Election Commission worked as very autonomously, very independently during his regime? And now some people allege that Election Commission is a caged bird or caged parrot.
In my humble opinion, sir, I don't think the Election Commission is presently a caged parrot, sir. However, sir, during the tenure of Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, the leadership of the Election Commission, particularly held by Mr. T.N. Sheshan, was particularly very aggressive in ensuring the implementation of rules, the moral code of conduct, and he was particularly sure about articulating them out loud. So therefore, I think it was the then time when such strict action were taken and people were satisfied with it. Present scenario, sir, I think by and large Election Commission has been very successful in managing the world's largest election ever happened in the history of human civilization. 97 crore.
But Election Commission has failed to dispel all the suspicion about the efficacy of EVMs. Why the opposition remains suspicious of the way EVMs are used? Do you think the opposition parties are becoming cynic?
So the opposition parties have raised concerns regarding the EVMs because in some cases they have alleged the EVMs have been manipulated, they have been stored in a different way, they have been transported in an irregular way. I think the Supreme Court has done very rightly in recently coming out of a judgment that the political parties, the oppositions, can claim a rechecking of EVMs with the VVPAT systems will not be destroyed by the Election Commission as ordered by the Supreme Court. I think, sir, this judgment puts rest to a lot of queries, a lot of concerns of the opposition party. Since then, sir, I think I have heard very less about allegations putting on EVM, sir.
Okay. Nice. Meghal, your interview is over. You may go now.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. May I come in, sir?
Come in. Have your seat, Meghal.
Thank you, sir.
What's the meaning of your name, Meghal?
Sir, Meghal is derived from the word Megh, that is the clouds which have the capacity to rain. It's a derivative of it, sir.
So something derived from cloud is called Meghal.
Yes, the dark clouds.
Okay. You are excellent candidate, Meghal. We have been interviewing hundreds of students.
Sir.
Not only in the CAPF category, but even civil services category. Considering all these candidates, at least for CAPF, you are so far the best. So we are satisfied, not only satisfied, we are excelled with your performance on all the count. Your knowledge is commendable on all the different dimensions of IR, whether it is Indo-China, Indo-Bangladesh kind of things. Your opinions are very balanced in spite of some tempting instigations or some pressures. You remain steadfast in having a neutrality. That's a very important attribute of an administrator, particularly police officer. Your articulation is also effective. You are having very strong clarity of language, simply because your concepts are clear. So your selection of words are also appropriate. And your body language is positive. Your facial expressions are positive and enthusiastic. That's good. Your entry is good, and sitting posture may a little bit improve. You may go back in the chair and can have a more straight posture. But overall, it's not bad. It's good. And eye contact is good, and hand placements are also in place. That means there is no wild movement of hand. There was a slight movement here and there. So on all different counts which we consider for assessment, you pass with flying colors. We don't have any suggestion. Only thing is that while quoting any data, you may be more careful. That means you quoted $117 billion of import from China?
Yes.
Okay. Including Hong Kong or excluding Hong Kong?
Excluding Hong Kong.
Okay. But the ministry's website suggests it is $101.8 billion for 23-24.
Okay.
Still, basically, the data was meant to analyze a particular structure of trade, and that analysis was realistic. So that's it. If you have any doubt or question, you can ask.
No, sir.
Okay, all the best.
Thank you, sir.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.